We continue our coverage of the International Booker. This time, though, we have a shortlist. 4 of the books that are on the shortlist this year I have already reviewed, and you can see them elsewhere. This is number 5. When we got to the shortlist, I had predicted a set of books to make it, and only 2 of the 6 that I predicted made it, because I'm not very good at this. But this one that we're reviewing today is one of the ones that I successfully predicted. Everybody successfully predicted this one. This one seemed like a shoo-in, and it feels like one that's probably in competition to win. And this book is called Small Boat. So this book is in 3 chapters, and 2 of those 3 chapters are from the perspective of a woman who works with the French migrant response, and she's responsible for coordinating boats and sending them out and so on, and the responses to emergency calls. And the book is from her perspective as she defends her actions on a night where a collection of migrants who were traveling to France drowned on the way there. Like most people, I thought that the first chapter of this book was great. The first chapter is kind of treated like a psychological thriller. The main woman is very unreliable and she keeps downplaying her part and her actions in it. And she is then confronted during this chapter with a moment where it reveals that she wasn't quite telling the truth and that she might have actually had more direct involvement in the incident than she is claiming she did. And that's treated like a thriller reveal, like, oh my god, what a twist, that kind of thing. The first chapter is very engaging, the debating is rigorous, and I think it's a really valuable perspective to have. I really like how the narrator is trying to outthink any possible criticism of herself. She's often very rigorously defending herself against accusations with very little provocation. And often she'll be very, very aware of how she thinks people will respond to what she says. One example that comes up to my mind is a bit when she's talking about how she's actually not to blame for the migrants drowning. It was the system that put the migrants there in the water in the first place. It was that system's fault for them drowning. It wasn't her fault for not sending a rescue boat. And when she's saying this in the interrogation room that she's in, she thinks, oh, now they're going to think that this argument is stupid and belittles their circumstance and so on. And she's aware that some of the arguments she's saying will sound stupid and preachy and bullshitty to the people that are interviewing her. And it feels realistic the way that she does that. There are other moments where she is technically correct in a very cold, logical way of reasoning through the situation that is clearly something of a coping mechanism. But then you get to certain situations where you think, all right, now that we're in this gray area, there's a choice between just doing a thing that is moral and doing a thing that isn't moral at this point. And you chose to do the thing that isn't moral. And she's like, well, no, I thought you might say this, so here's an argument against that. So yeah, she's always trying to outthink the person reading the book. After the first chapter, though, I think that the book starts to overstate itself, and it started to do things that I did not particularly want. I have no notes on the second chapter of this book, except that it's pretty well written. I would have preferred if it functioned more as like a depressing coda to the book, but that's only because I don't like the third chapter of this book at all. I don't like how the narrator confronts what they did at the end. That doesn't feel satisfying. She literally says, I kind of lost sight of what a human life is with these shed loads of migrants getting dumped in the sea every day. It's a little too on the nose. I don't think in this section she's admitting full responsibility, but it's still a kind of recognition, and I still think that's too far. I would prefer the book to just be more uncomfortable and leave everything up in the air and not answer any questions. The narrator voice totally changes, and again, it was just not a way I found satisfying. In this third chapter, the narrator basically says, I never understood all of these solemn cliches about the sea. They always feel very pretentious. And then not 2 pages after she says that, she says, spoonfuls of 20, 30 poor people, men, women, and children, and the monstrous maw gulps it all down, foaming at its mouth. It's the sacrifice the world pours into the mouth of evil, what it has to give it, so everyone else can sleep in peace, and it won't devour everything. I don't know if that part's meant to be an intentional contrast with what she has just said, but either way, it feels like that the narrator is confronting these themes head on in a way that, as I said, was not particularly interesting. In this book, we are dealing with an amoral character, and their response is clearly something of an allegory for the nation's response to migrants, and any nation's response to migrants. It's to other them, it's to pretend it's not there, it's to go, well, it's not really our responsibility, it's the responsibility of everything around them. They don't have to come here, they could have chosen anywhere else. There's all that kind of, like that thinking that's going on in the book that is relevant to the way that a nation would respond to these things. So the fact that the character starts to feel any kind of recognition or sadness or guilt just doesn't feel pertinent. And I think that the audience should be trusted to understand that this way of thinking has its flaws, and I think that they should be trusted to understand that this should be bettered. I think the best version of identifying recognition in media I've seen recently is The Zone of Interest, where Hoss retches as he walks down the stairwell, and that's the end of the movie, that's the full stop. If this book's version version of that recognition was translated into a movie, the entire third act of it would be Hoss retching in the stairwell. It would be 40 minutes long. So that's why I thought it wasn't particularly interesting and kind of boring, was because it just didn't feel like a point that needed to be made with what the first third was doing. I'm not interested in her feeling guilt. I'm interested in the way that she extends her logic to avoid that. And as I've said, I think that that first third has great immersion into how people think about those that they can't see, and I don't feel like the next two chapters expand on that in a way that I find satisfying. And like a lot of books on this long list, while I don't love them, I do find them admirable, and I thought that this was engaging for what it was, and pretty interesting. So yeah, I reckon you should read this if you like, and that's another book on the shortlist done. And I've only got one more left, which is Heartlamp, and I'll get to that shortly. Thank you, bye!